The stench was the first thing King Edmund Wolfson noticed. A ripe cocktail of unwashed bodies, damp stone, and despair. It was the signature perfume of his dungeons, a place he hadn't visited in 3 years, but was now forced to inspect thanks to the 30 prisoners acquired from the Battle of Thornfield. This place is a disgrace. The air quality is suboptimal. Also, I smell sadness. And something that might be cheese but is definitely not cheese. Let's go back to the nice room with the big chair. Edmund ignored the thought, the particular register that operated from pure wolf logic and had never once offered useful advice about statecraft. His polished boots echoed on the slick flagstones. Marcus Gray walked beside him, ledger in hand. Edmund's second, his closest friend, and the only man in the kingdom who could sigh at a king without consequence. 30 in total, my king. 22 soldiers from the Blackwood Pack, 8 non-combatants, medics, cooks. Show me, Edmund commanded. He hated this part of war. The neat lines on a map became this, rows of tired, dirty faces staring at him with fear and defiance. He walked the line. His wolf offered commentary with the confidence of someone who had never been wrong about anything, despite being wrong about everything. That one has a poor haircut. This one is thinking about cheese. I could go for some cheese. Cheese would improve morale. You should distribute cheese. This is a leadership opportunity. He paused in front of a cell holding 3 women. 2 were huddled at the back, but one stood near the bars, chin lifted. Covered in dirt and dried blood that wasn't her own, brown hair in a messy knot. Her eyes, startlingly clear green, met his without flinching. She wasn't afraid. She was annoyed, as if he were an inconvenience interrupting her very busy schedule of being imprisoned. This one? He asked Marcus. Bridget Fenn, field medic. Reports say she was treating our wounded alongside her own when she was captured. He took a step closer, drawn by an inexplicable pull. His wolf suddenly went silent. For a blissful half-second, Edmund enjoyed the peace. Then it hit him. Not a thought. A physical impact, a lightning strike that bypassed his brain and slammed into his soul. A scent flooded his senses. Wild herbs, clean rain, and something warm and alive that was purely her. Mate. Her. It's her, the one we've been waiting for. Why is she in a box? Edmund, why is our mate in a box? This is a Category 5 protocol failure. You should bring her a dead thing, something fresh. That says commitment. Edmund's entire body went rigid. His heart hammered. He could feel his eyes wanting to flash gold. He gripped his sword hilt, knuckles white, forcing it all down. Bridget blinked. Something had happened. The air had changed. A wave of warmth rolled off the man in front of her cell and hit her square in the chest. Her pulse kicked, her skin flushed. Every hair on her arms stood on end. Oh no. Pulse just doubled. Skin is warm. You're doing that breathing thing where you pretend you're not breathing differently. You are. I'm counting. He smells like pine and snow and authority, and you need to go closer. Bridget's conscious mind slammed a door on the thought so hard it rattled her teeth. No. She knew this feeling. She had trusted it before, the sense that someone powerful was also someone safe. Her previous alpha had given her that feeling right up until the day he traded his entire medical corps to a neighboring pack for mining rights. 7 healers, Bridget included, handed over in a treaty-like equipment. He'd called it loyalty. He'd looked her in the eye and told her it was her duty, while signing the paper that made her someone else's property. This wasn't recognition. This was danger. That is not danger. That is a mate. Your body knows. Your stupid brain is filing it wrong. Bridget met the king's eyes with flat, practiced calm. Can I help you, Your Majesty? Or are you just here to stare? Edmund needed to leave. Before his wolf did something catastrophically stupid, like purring. You should sit closer. Press your shoulder against the bars. She will understand. This is basic courtship. Why are you standing there with your mouth open? You look defective. Is she wounded? He managed. Marcus just kept reading. No, my king, refused treatment, said others needed it more. She is a noble and selfless angel, and she is standing on a filthy floor. Fix it. I am making a list of your failures. Failure 1, mate in box. Failure 2, you did not bring cheese. He spun on his heel. The conditions are inadequate. Cleaner water, more blankets. He strode away. Behind him, Bridget watched the king practically flee. He ran. He ran. You made the scary eyes, and he ran. This is why we can't have nice things. Well, Bridget murmured. That was weird. The first sign that something was different about their captivity came not from the king, but from the man who had raised him. Lucius Hale appeared in the dungeon the next morning. Tall, broad-shouldered, silver-streaked dark hair, a weathered face that carried the particular gravity of a man who had held a kingdom together when it had no king. He'd been Edmund's regent for 11 years after the old king died, had taught the boy to ride, to fight, to rule. The pack still called him the Pillar. He carried blankets and bread, distributing both to every cell with the efficiency of a man who had been solving problems his whole life. He is an alpha, not the king one. Different scent, iron and wood smoke. Strong. His wolf is calm. That's either very good or very bad. I'm Lucius Hale, he said, handing Bridget a blanket and a wrapped loaf. I'm a prisoner, Bridget said flatly. I can see that. Your people were brought in without adequate provisions. That's been corrected. On whose orders? Mine. He said it simply. I don't need orders to feed people. He crouched beside old Gregor. The arm needs setting. I'll send the healer. Gregor stared. Why? Because it'll heal wrong if I don't, Lucius said, as if the answer were obvious. He turned back to Bridget. You were treating our wounded on the battlefield. I was treating the wounded, Bridget corrected. I don't sort by pack. She paused. My field kit was confiscated when they brought us in. It has medicines your healers won't recognize. Blackwood plants. I'd like it back. Lucius studied her. I'll see what I can do. I oversaw the intake myself. Your supplies were cataloged and stored. He nodded once and walked away. He brought food without being asked. That is correct alpha behavior. Take notes for the other one. The bread was warm. Gregor's wrist got set that afternoon. And Lucius now knew exactly where her medical kit was stored, and what was in it. 2 guards moved Bridget to a room above the castle's hot springs. Real bed, lumpy mattress, a small table with a chair, and a window overlooking a dreary inner courtyard. The air was muggy, the stone walls wept condensation, and a faint smell of sulfur hung in the air, like being locked in a giant's armpit. Her wolf had opinions, immediate, loud, non-negotiable. No, 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 no. The bed faces the door. We are exposed. Move it, now. Also, 1 blanket? 1? This is not a nest. This is a punishment. We need at least 4 more. And the walls are weeping. This is not a room. This is a grievance. Couldn't have just given me a nicer cell, could they? She muttered, dragging the bed toward the corner with a screech of iron on stone. Had to get creative with it. The window has no curtain. Anyone could look in. We need fabric. We need to claim this space, or this space will claim us. Bridget ignored the nesting instinct. She'd had a lifetime of practice, and sat on the lumpy bed. She was alone, separated from her people. That was the point. But as she sat in the steamy dark, the unbidden thought returned. The king's face in the dungeon. The way his eyes had gone gold for a split second. The wave of warmth. You're thinking about him. I can tell because your heart rate just changed. Don't bother denying it. I have the receipts. I'm thinking about escape routes, Bridget said to the empty room. You are a terrible liar. I live inside you. I know what escape routes feel like, and this is not that. This is the warm, squirmy one, the one you hate. She was not thinking about the king. Liar. That evening the king came. His wolf called it strategic necessity. His wolf called him a liar. You are going because you miss her. It has been 8 hours. Bring berries. She likes berries. Sit close. Press your arm against hers. Proximity is the language of commitment. He knocked, one green eye through the crack. Your Majesty, she said, the vocal equivalent of a brick wall. She's using the war face again. Don't retreat. Hold position. She can smell your uncertainty. Be a tree. Trees are confident. May I come in? He asked, trying to sound kingly and not like a nervous teenager. She stepped back, gesturing to the humid room with a sarcastic flourish. Be my guest. Welcome to the royal sauna. He stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind him. The room was small, and the humidity amplified his awareness of her. Her scent, wild herbs, clean rain, that thing underneath that was just her, filled the space and made his wolf practically vibrate with contentment. Closer. We are closer now. This is good. I told you proximity would work. Now sit, preferably touching. He did not sit. He stood in the middle of the room, like a man who had forgotten what arms were for. Bridget stood with her arms crossed, her expression a careful, guarded blank. She had moved the bed, he noticed, corner angled to see the door. A strategic placement. A wolf's placement. To what do I owe the honor? She asked. Have you come to watch the walls sweat? He's here, in our den. Do you see how he's standing? He doesn't know what to do with his hands. His heart rate is absurd. I can hear it from here. And his scent is doing the pine and snow thing. The thing that makes your knees... Don't even. I felt the wobble. Don't you dare pretend that was the humidity. I came to see if you were settled, Edmund said, his voice too loud in the small space. Oh, I'm settled, she said, her tone dripping with false brightness. It's lovely. I particularly enjoy the pervasive sense of dampness. It's very atmospheric. He should have brought food. Berries. Something with berries. Does he know nothing about courtship? He's just standing there talking. This is painful to watch. I apologize for the room, best I could do on short notice. Tell him to sit down. If he sits, his scent will settle and this will be partially his corner. No, we are not nesting around the enemy king, even though he would fit perfectly in that spot by the wall. No. I'm a prisoner of war, Your Majesty. Let's dispense with pleasantries. What do you want? Information? Loyalty? My singing voice is terrible, so a propaganda ballad is out. Edmund heard what she was hiding. Pulse elevated, body angled toward him even as her words pushed away. She says no with her mouth and yes with her blood pressure. You should growl, low and soft. She will respond to that. Trust me. I want nothing, he said. Bridget laughed, short and bitter. No one does something for nothing, especially not kings. My last alpha taught me that very well. You said no one does something for nothing, but what you meant was, I'm not worth something for nothing. I heard it. I live here. And I'm furious. Not at him. At the one who broke this in you. The air crackled. Edmund saw it. The deep-seated mistrust. The reflexive assumption that his kindness was a weapon. Underneath it, a pain that had nothing to do with him. So what is this? She pressed, gesturing around the steamy room. Phase 1 of my conversion? Better food? A book, perhaps? Do I get a puppy if I tell you our troop numbers? She is magnificent. She is afraid, and she is still fighting. This is the one. I was right. I am not your former alpha, Edmund growled, alpha power leaking for a second. She didn't flinch. The humor died. Then prove it. Release my people. All of them. Until then, you and I have nothing to say to each other. She stepped forward, closed the distance. Oh, there it is, the wobble. You felt that in your spine. I didn't do it. That was all you. An impossible demand. He couldn't release 30 prisoners without the entire kingdom calling for his head. She is testing our character. Do not bring up the dead rabbit thing right now. He looked at her, this impossible woman, in a damp, miserable room, and knew he was lost. The king, the conqueror, and she had just taken him captive. The following days were a special kind of torture. Edmund avoided her room, a decision that earned him a constant, low-grade internal commentary from a wolf who was absolutely certain that physical distance was the primary obstacle to a successful mating. Day 3 of the great snubbing. Our mate thinks we have abandoned her. She is probably rearranging furniture. I do not know why you insist on this separation when the solution is so simple. Go to her. Bring a snack. Sit close. The shoulder thing. I have explained this. The bond was a physical ache, a constant pull in her direction. He saw her face in council reports. He heard her sarcastic tone in the rustle of parchments. He couldn't eat properly. He couldn't sleep without dreaming of wild herbs and green eyes. Also, Lucius's left ear continues to droop. I want this on the record. Bridget settled into defiant waiting. She refused to show gratitude for the upgraded meals or the clean clothes. Inside, she was a knot of anxiety, and her wolf would not rest. You moved the table between the bed and the door. That's not organizing, that's nesting. You're building a defensive perimeter out of furniture because you can't build one out of a pack. I'm organizing. You are nesting badly because you only have one blanket and a table. This is the saddest nest I have ever seen. If the Alpha King could see this, he would weep. He would bring all the blankets. Stop thinking about the Alpha King. I'm not thinking about him. You are. Every time you think about it, your pulse does the flutter, and I am right here counting. Liar. Edmund threw himself into duties with a ferocity that exhausted everyone around him. He reviewed tax codes. He inspected granaries. He sat through the monthly grumble moot, an ancient tradition where any pack member could air their grievances, no matter how petty. He sat on his large, ornate throne, the picture of kingly gravitas, while an elderly she-wolf named Elspeth spent 10 minutes lodging a formal complaint about her neighbor's wind chimes. They're not musical, Your Majesty, Elspeth insisted, her voice trembling with indignation. It's just clanking, at all hours. The issue of unauthorized clanking is a grave one, Elspeth. I will have Marcus look into it. Before Elspeth could elaborate on the specific pitch of the offending clanks, Lucius stepped in from the side of the hall. Not dramatically, just calmly, the way he always did. He crouched beside Elsbeth's chair and murmured something. She listened, her indignation softening. She patted his hand. She left satisfied. Lucius caught Edmund's eye and gave a slight nod. Handled. It was what Lucius did. Quietly, efficiently, the way he'd done it for decades. The pillar. The man who'd held the kingdom together when Edmund was a boy grieving his father, and Lucius had been the only steady thing in the world. Half the pack owed him this kind of practical gratitude. He showed up at your door when your roof leaked, remembered your child's name, settled disputes so fairly that both sides felt heard. He didn't need to scheme. He simply did, consistently, the things that made people think he'd make a good king. And Edmund, watching it, felt the old, familiar weight. His father had been like that, the natural leader, the man who filled a room. Edmund had to try. Every day, on the throne and off it, he had to try to be something he wasn't sure he was. He resolved the wind chime situation before we could. His ear, however, remains a problem. "Your Majesty," Marcus murmured, "you seem distracted." "I'm contemplating the geopolitical implications of unregulated wind chimes." Marcus sighed, the sigh of a man who had been sighing at Edmund since childhood, which was fitting since Marcus had been at his side almost as long as Lucius had. Lucius's son, though you wouldn't know it to look at them. Marcus had arrived in Lucius's life fully grown, left by a mother Lucius had loved decades ago and never spoken of. The letter she'd sent with Marcus had been short. "He's yours. I'm sorry I kept him from you." Lucius had taken one look at the boy and opened his home without hesitation. That was also what Lucius did. That night, Edmund summoned Marcus to his study. "The prisoner manifest." Marcus handed it over. "Is there a problem, my king?" Then he pulled a folded piece of paper from inside his ledger. "The medic, Fen. She's been sending medical assessments through the guards. Stole paper from her food tray, sharpened a charcoal nub against the wall to make it write fine enough for medical notation." He shook his head with something like admiration. "She also fashioned a splint for one of the prisoners, using strips from her bedsheet and a broken chair leg. The guards didn't even notice until the arm was already set." Edmund unfolded the paper. It was covered in small, precise handwriting. A systematic assessment of every prisoner's medical condition, organized by severity. 3 names underlined twice. Jasper Reed, 17, compound fracture of the left forearm with early signs of infection, needs debridement within 48 hours or faces amputation. Old Gregor, wrist set at the wrong angle. Nora Beach, untreated concussion. She hadn't just sent a plea, she'd sent a triage report. "Our healers confirmed it all," Marcus said. "She was right about every one. More accurate than Alistair's initial examination." Edmund stared at the paper. A prisoner with no supplies had stolen writing materials and produced a medical report precise enough to shame his chief healer. She is so smart. She is fixing things from inside a box. This is the best mate. Let the small one out before he loses his arm. And bring her berries. Release Jasper Reed tonight. Treat the arm first, using her instructions. "My king, Lucius will want to know." Edmund hesitated. Not because Lucius would object. Lucius would understand, probably better than anyone. But the old man's understanding always came with a quiet assessment, a weighing. Even now, even after all these years, Edmund felt like a student presenting work to his teacher. "Tell him in the morning." The next morning, he went to her room. Bridget opened the door, expression guarded. "Have you come to check on the structural integrity of the ceiling?" "I think it's weeping more on the left side today." "Jasper Reed is free," he said without preamble. "His arm was treated using your assessment." She went still. The sarcasm evaporated, leaving a stark, searching intensity. Looking for the trick. Heart rate elevated, left hand in a fist, that's her control hand. "He used your work to save the boy. Do not make the war face." She made the war face. 1 boy out of 30. Gregor's wrist is being reset today. Nora is being evaluated this afternoon. Am I supposed to swoon? I'm not much of a swooner. I tend to get dizzy and knock things over. You are impossible. Your assessment was the most competent medical work this castle has produced in a year, Edmund said. I would be a fool not to act on it. Something cracked in her expression. A hairline fracture. He hadn't just been kind. He'd respected her work. Treated her as a professional, not a charity case. Oh, the crack. I felt it. Your heart just did a thing it hasn't done since before the betrayal. And that one was different. And the other 29, she said, softer now. That's the reality I'm trying to change. One name at a time. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into the pocket of her tunic and pulled out another folded piece of stolen paper. You'll want this then. Updated assessments. 3 more need attention this week. He took it. Their fingers brushed. The contact lasted less than a second. Every hair on our arm just stood up. But sure. Casual. He definitely didn't notice. Except he did, because his scent just changed. And if you tell me that was the humidity, I will never speak to you again. See that you do, she said, and closed the door. She stood behind it for a long time, pressing her hand against the spot where their fingers had touched. Over the next week, Edmund released Gregor and Nora, following Bridget's recommendations. He did it quietly, through Marcus. He didn't visit Bridget. He let the actions speak. His wolf thought the actions should also include food. You have released 3 of her people. This is adequate but incomplete. You should also send berries. Why do you resist the berry strategy? Berries communicate reliability. These are attractive qualities in a mate. Lucius came to see him. Not at council. Privately. He sat in the chair across from Edmund's desk, the same chair he'd sat in 1,000 times when Edmund was a boy, and the decisions had been too large for small hands. The same chair where Lucius had explained, patiently and without condescension, that being king meant making choices that hurt, and that the hurt was the proof you were doing it right. The same chair where, after the old king's funeral, Lucius had said, I'll hold the kingdom until you're ready, however long that takes. 3 prisoners released, Lucius said, his voice gentle, not accusatory, concerned, the way a father is concerned when he sees his child making a choice he wouldn't make. Without negotiation. Without terms. They were a boy, an old man, and a baker, Lucius. I know who they were. I brought them blankets. Lucius leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the posture of a man settling in for a conversation he considered important. Edmund, I'm not questioning your compassion. I never have. Compassion is one of the things I'm proudest of in you. But compassion without strategy leaves the pack exposed. Your father understood that. The Blackwood prisoners after Ravensgate. Holding them for 2 years is what secured our eastern border. My father's methods are not the only methods. No, Lucius agreed. He was quiet for a moment, studying Edmund with the particular attention of a man who had watched a boy become a king and still saw both. I raised you to be better than your father in many ways, but not softer. The world doesn't reward soft kings, Edmund. He said it with love. That was the worst part. It was always with love that Lucius delivered his hardest truths, and the love made them land deeper than cruelty ever could. I worry about you. That's all. A father worries. Edmund looked at the man who had been more father to him than his own blood and felt the familiar cocktail of gratitude and inadequacy that Lucius always stirred in him. I know you do. Lucius stood, squeezed Edmund's shoulder, and left. The study felt emptier without him. It always did. On the 8th day, Edmund went back. Bridget's armor was thinner. Nora was home. Come in, she said quietly. The room was different. Extra blankets, arranged in a specific instinctual way. Smooth stones on the windowsill, sorted by size. The book he'd sent was on the table. She'd read half of it. And a chair near the bed with a space beside it. A space exactly the right size for someone specific. She's nesting. Look at the blanket arrangement. The stones. She's making this place hers. And she moved the chair. There's a space. That space is for someone specific. She made a spot, and she doesn't even know she made it. Bridget caught him looking at the chair and felt her face heat. She didn't know why she'd moved it. It had just felt wrong where it was. You made him a spot. You made the scary pine smell king a spot in your nest and you didn't even realize. I'm so proud. I'm also furious. These emotions can coexist. Nora is safe? She asked, breaking the silence. Yes, and Gregor. They're home. She nodded, swallowing hard. 3 out of 30. It's what I can do, for now. She finally looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time he didn't see a prisoner looking at her captor. He saw a woman looking at a man, trying to understand him. Why are you doing this? She asked. A genuine question, the kind that costs something to ask because the answer might matter. Because your assessments showed me who they were, he said, his voice low. Not leverage. People. A baker, a fisherman, a scared kid. You made me see them. And once I saw them, I couldn't unsee it. Her breath hitched, a small sound, almost nothing. She sank onto the bed, looking down at her hands. I don't understand you. You're the Wolfson King. Your father laid siege to my home for 2 years. Our packs have been killing each other for a generation. And you're releasing prisoners because a medic's triage report told you to. Maybe I'm not my father, he said softly. He took a half step closer. He didn't sit in the space she'd made for him, but he stood near it. Everyone expects me to be him, he continued, the words coming before he could stop them. They expect ruthless, cunning. Lucius raised me to be him, the warrior, the strategist. And I've been trying, but I look at this war and all I see is a waste, a wound that never heals. And what do you see? She asked. People, he said. Scared, tired people who want to go home. On both sides. Bridget looked up, and in her eyes he saw recognition. She, the healer who fixed broken things, saw the cracks in him. And he, the king who couldn't stop breaking things, saw the scar tissue in her. A wound that never heals, she repeated softly. I know something about those. The air in the room grew thick with unspoken things. The bond between them pulled. He could see the faint freckles across her nose, the way a stray curl fell near her temple. She was looking at him the way she looked at a wound she was deciding whether to treat. Assessing the damage, calculating the risk of reaching in. Kiss her. The proximity is correct. If you do not kiss her in 4 seconds, I am going to make you growl, and that will be embarrassing for both of us. He took another step. She didn't move back. Her gaze dropped to his lips. He leaned in. He's doing the lean. The lean. You're tilting toward him. This is actually... A frantic pounding shattered the spell. Your Majesty, it's Lucius. He's collapsed. Edmund's blood went cold. Not a political calculation. Not a strategic concern. Lucius. The man who had raised him. Who had sat by his bed during fevers and taught him to hold a sword and been the only steady thing in the world when his father died. He was running before the guard finished speaking. No, both wolves said simultaneously, for entirely different reasons. The infirmary was chaos. Healers rushed back and forth, the air thick with antiseptic herbs and fear. Lucius lay on a cot, face gray, breathing shallow. He looked small, the pillar reduced to something fragile and human. Pack members crowded the doorway, stricken. Marcus was already there, kneeling beside his father's cot, one hand gripping the old man's fingers, his face white and set. What happened? Edmund demanded, his voice cracking. He pushed to the bedside and gripped the edge of the cot. This was Lucius, not a lord, not an advisor. The man who had held Edmund through his first grief, who had taught him that a king eats last, who had said, I'll hold the kingdom until you're ready, and meant every word. The man who was more father to him than his own blood. He is hurt. Our family is hurt. Find who did this. Alistair shook his head grimly. Fast-acting poison. I don't recognize the compound. It's not from our territory. The captain of the guard appeared with an empty vial found near the guest wing, a leather-bound book, the herbal treatise Edmund had sent Bridget, and a terrified kitchen boy, who stammered that he'd seen the prisoner near the wine cellar. The room erupted. The pack members in the doorway, already frightened, already raw with the sight of the pillar gray-faced on a cot, turned their fear into fury. The prisoner the king had favored, the enemy medic. She had poisoned the man who'd brought her people blankets. Marcus, still kneeling by his father, looked up at Edmund with desperate, searching eyes. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Edmund saw the evidence. The planted book, the boy's testimony, and underneath the grief and the rage, a cold thought he hated himself for having. Could she have? He didn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. But Lucius was gray-faced, and the evidence was stacked, and the mob was screaming, and Marcus was looking at him like he held the answer to everything. Marcus tried to speak through the shouting. "She's a guarded prisoner. How could she have—" but was drowned out. "Captain," Edmund said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Place Bridget Fenn under arrest. Confine her to the high tower. Double the guard." He felt the order land in his own chest. But Lucius was dying, and until he knew the truth, he couldn't protect her from the mob any other way. 6 guards, swords drawn. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Lucius Hale." Bridget understood. She'd seen mobs before. She knew what a king had to do when the crowd wanted blood and the evidence was stacked. The arrest wasn't the betrayal. The arrest was survival. Hers and his. "I understand," she said quietly. She held out her wrists. She went calmly. "He's protecting you. This is what protection looks like when there's a mob. He'll come. He'll explain." For the first time, Bridget didn't argue with her wolf. She believed it. The high tower, cold, clean, silent. Bridget sat and waited, not with dread, with patience. He would come. They would figure this out. He'll come. He's dealing with the crisis. He has to deal with the crisis first. Then he'll come and explain. We trust him. We decided to trust him, and he will come. Lucius was recovering. Edmund sat by his bedside for hours, the way a son sits with a father. He held the old man's hand and felt the rough calluses of decades of service, and remembered being 12 years old and terrified, and Lucius saying in that calm, certain voice, "You don't have to be ready. You just have to begin." Marcus sat on the other side, his face carved in worry, his fingers gripping his father's arm as if he could hold the old man in the world through sheer force. The 3 of them, the family that had built itself from loss and letters and years of quiet devotion, gathered around a sickbed while the castle buzzed with fury at the prisoner in the tower. 2 days later, Edmund went to the tower. He unlocked the door. Bridget turned from the window, and for the first time, the very first time, she let him see her without armor. "Thank God you're here," she said. The relief in her voice was so raw, so unguarded, that it stopped him in the doorway. This was the woman who had demanded the release of 30 prisoners with steel in her voice, and she was looking at him like he was the answer to a prayer. He stepped inside. He sat down. He looked at his hands. "Bridget," he said, and his voice was wrong, too careful. "I need to ask you something." The warmth in her face flickered, just a fraction. "The poison," he said. "It came from a Blackwood Territory plant. Your healers use it. Your field kit would have contained it." He looked up at her, and his eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted, and filled with something that looked like grief. Is there any possibility that you—" He couldn't finish it. He didn't have to. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Bridget had ever heard. He was asking her. He was sitting in this tower, looking at her with the face of a man who had just spent 2 days at his dying father's bedside, and he was asking her if she had done it. She had opened herself up. "Thank God you're here." The most vulnerable thing she'd said to anyone in years. And he had answered with doubt. "No, no, no, no. We opened up. We leaned." The warm thing, the pine smell, the way he said, "using your assessment," And he is asking us if we poisoned? The warmth went out of her face. Not with anger, not with sarcasm, with something worse. The quiet click of a door closing from the inside. No, she said. Her voice was perfectly flat. I did not poison anyone. I had to ask, he said, wretched. Lucius raised me. He's the only father I've ever... I understand why you asked, she said. And she did. That was the worst part. She understood completely. He loved Lucius. The evidence pointed at her, and he was a man torn between two impossible things. She understood it the way she'd understood her last alpha's reasoning when he'd traded her away. Understanding didn't help. Understanding never helped. You could see exactly why someone chose their doubt over your character, and it still destroyed you. You can go now, she said. You should bring her a blanket. She looks cold. It was so badly timed, so perfectly wrong, and so completely sincere that Edmund almost laughed. He didn't. He looked at this woman who had said, "Thank God you're here," and was now asking him to leave. And he understood that he had just made the worst mistake of his life. Please, she said. And the word was so quiet it barely existed. He left. The door locked behind him. Bridget sat very still. Inside her, her wolf, the fierce, tiny, impossible wolf who had been screaming at her to trust, to lean, to stop calling it danger, went silent. Not because the wolf left, because Bridget had listened. She had leaned, and it hadn't been enough. Come back, please. I can't help you if you're not here. Silence. 3 days passed. Edmund sat by Lucius's bedside and watched the old man recover. Too fast, too clean. The poison had been described as devastating, but Lucius was sitting up, taking broth, receiving visitors with pale nobility. He squeezed Edmund's hand and said, "Don't worry about me, boy. I'm too stubborn to die." And Edmund had smiled, because that was Lucius, because that was the man who had raised him, and the smile felt like the truest thing he'd done in days. But something nagged, a medic's voice in his memory. Your assessment was the most competent medical work this castle has produced in a year. He went to the tower. Bridget was by the window, silhouetted against the gray sky. She didn't turn. She didn't acknowledge him. The woman who had said, "Thank God you're here" 3 days ago was gone, replaced by the same stillness he'd seen in the dungeon, but colder, emptier. The dungeon version had been angry. This version had given up. Describe the symptoms, he said. The poison. What would a Blackwood medic see that our healers wouldn't? Silence. For a long moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. He deserved that. He knew he deserved that. Then, without turning, what are the symptoms? He told her. The gray pallor, the rapid collapse, the shallow breathing, and then the recovery. Faster than expected, remarkably clean. Something shifted in her posture, not warmth, focus. The healer waking up. Shadowthorn, she said. Blackwood territory plant. Your healers wouldn't know it, but it was in my field kit, the one confiscated when we were brought in. You recognize it from the symptoms alone? I've treated it twice. She stood, stiff but precise. At a lethal dose, it kills within the hour, no recovery. At a sublethal dose, carefully measured, it produces exactly what you described. She paused. But getting the dose right requires precision measured in drops. Too much and you die. Too little and you get a stomachache. An assassin pouring it into someone else's wine can't calibrate that. Someone dosing themselves, feeling their own body's response and stopping at the right moment, can. Edmund went still. You're saying... I'm saying that a victim poisoned against their will shows reflex distress at ingestion, coughing, gagging. A victim who drinks it voluntarily shows none. And Shadowthorn at a survivable dose leaves a marker. blue-gray discoloration at the gum line. A lethal dose kills before the marker appears. She finally turned to face him. If Lucius has that marker, clean ingestion, and a recovery that's 3 weeks too fast, he dosed himself. With my medicine, from my kit, that he personally cataloged when your prisoners were brought in. The room went very still. Edmund's mind was working, and his heart was breaking, and they were arriving at the same conclusion from different directions. Lucius. His Lucius. The man who had taught him to ride. You're sure about the medicine? I'm sure about the medicine. He stood. Can you write it? Everything. The plant, the dosage, the marker, the timeline? I'll need real paper, charcoal smears. For the first time in days, something, not quite a smile, crossed her face. There she is. Not all the way, but the healer is back. She wrote the report in an hour, 3 devastating pages. She handed it through the tower door. This is your proof. What you do with it is your choice. He looked at her, the woman he had doubted, the woman who was saving him anyway. I'm sorry I asked, he said. I know, she said. No warmth. Not yet. But no wall either. Something in between. A door that was closed but not locked. Now go do the thing. Edmund walked into the grand hall and ordered the assembly bell sounded. Within the hour, the hall was packed with every lord, knight, and servant within the castle walls. Lucius was there, supported by Marcus, looking pale but composed. Marcus hovered at his father's side, protective, worried, completely unaware that the man leaning on his arm was the architect of everything that had gone wrong. Edmund looked at them, the father who had raised him and the friend who stood beside him, and felt something crack in his chest. People of the Silverwood Pack, he began, his voice clear and strong. For a generation, we have been at war with the Blackwood Pack. We have been told it is a righteous war, a necessary war. We have bled for it. We have lost our sons and daughters to it. He paused. Let the silence work. I stand before you today to tell you that it ends. Now. Shocked silence. The 30 prisoners from Thornfield are free. All of them. Unconditionally. A worried mother called out, What about our safety? What guarantee do we have that Blackwood won't attack again? Edmund met her eyes. None, he said. That's the honest answer, and I won't insult you with a false one. We've held hostages for a generation, and it hasn't stopped the killing. The guarantee of more of the same isn't a guarantee. It's a prison for both sides. The first step towards something different has to come from the side that won. That's us. And it starts today. The hall was divided. Edmund turned. Bridget Fenn is innocent. He held up her report. This analysis identifies the poison as shadowthorn, a blackwood plant found only in the confiscated medical supplies that were cataloged on intake. It details the sublethal dosage, the marker, and the recovery timeline. Lucius, Edmund said, and his voice was quiet, gentle, the voice of a son speaking to a father. Show them your gums. Total silence. Lucius stood very still. His composure, the composure that had held a kingdom together for 11 years, held for one terrible moment. Then it broke. A small, tight movement of his jaw. Edmund saw it and felt something inside him die. This is absurd, Lucius said, but the conviction was gone. Alistair stepped forward. My lord, if I could just— You will not touch me. The snap was wrong, authority used as a shield, and every wolf heard it. Marcus was staring at his father. His face was very still, very white. Father, he said. and the word hung in the air like something falling. Lucius didn't look at his son. "Edmund," Lucius said, and for the first time he used the name without the title. "Not your majesty, just the name of the boy he'd raised. You were always too soft. I raised you as best I could, but you were your mother's son, not your father's. The pack needs strength. It needs what?" Edmund asked. "Your line? Marcus on the throne?" Marcus flinched as if struck. Father, what is he?" "Be quiet, Marcus," Lucius said. And in that sharp command, everyone in the hall heard it. The old man who loved his son, using that love as a tool. The father who had calculated his boy's future without asking the boy. "Then challenge me," Edmund said steadily, "if you believe I am unfit." Lucius drew the ceremonial dagger. He had been waiting for this. Not scheming exactly, but waiting. The way a man waits for something he has always believed was his right. "I, Lucius Hale, challenge Edmund Wolfson for the title of Alpha King." Edmund removed his tunic. "Now, we end this." The shift was violent. Lucius's wolf burst forth in a snarl of gray fur and heavy muscle. Older but enormous, scarred from a previous generation's battles, radiating the hard-earned authority of a wolf who had never backed down from anything. Edmund's wolf was different, leaner, faster, dark-furred, golden-eyed, vibrating with a tense energy that was less about dominance and more about something the pack couldn't name. They circled. The hall held its breath. Lucius lunged first, all heavy-shouldered force, trying to overwhelm with size and experience. Edmund was faster, dodging, weaving, letting the older wolf tire himself out. But Lucius was cunning. He feinted, drew Edmund in, and slammed his body into Edmund's side, sending him crashing into a stone pillar. Edmund's front leg buckled. He yelped, a sound that made half the hall flinch. His right shoulder drops before every lunge, sloppy. Also, his ear situation has not improved with the shift. Pathetic. Aim left. Lucius moved in, sensing the kill. Meanwhile, in the high tower, Bridget heard it. The roar of the crowd, the guttural snarls, the yelp that sounded like pain. She rushed to the window. Through the grand hall's high windows, she could see them. 2 wolves, one dark and one gray. Edmund was limping. The gray wolf was circling for another lunge. Her wolf spoke. Not the body narration, not tactical assessment. Something deeper than both. "He's fighting for his crown. He released your proof, and now he's going to die for it. You felt the bond in that dungeon. You've been calling it danger for 2 weeks. It was never danger. It was him. It was always him. He is bleeding right now, and I will not let you sit here while our mate dies. He is ours. You love him. You have loved him since the steamy room when he said, using your assessment, and your heart did the new thing, and you know it, and I know it, and get up." Her wolf was right. Her wolf had always been right. And for the first time in years, Bridget didn't argue, didn't reclassify, didn't file it under danger. She loved him. She loved the man who had asked the worst question and then believed her answer. She loved the king who had read her triage reports and freed a boy he didn't have to free. She loved him, and he was dying, and she was in a locked room, and that was unacceptable. The lock. I've been studying it for 2 days. The pin mechanism is corroded, weak at the 3rd tumbler. You have a hairpin. Get it. Now. The hairpin, the lock. Old metal giving way under precise, practiced pressure. The same hands that had fashioned splints from bedsheets, sharpened charcoal for medical notation, improvised tools from nothing her entire career. The lock clicked. The stairwell was empty, every guard pulled to the hall. She ran. Not because people were in danger, not because duty pulled her. She ran because the man she loved was bleeding in a hall below her, and every second she was not there was a second wasted, and her wolf was right. Her wolf had always been right, and she was done calling it anything else. Faster, down the spiral, left at the bottom, servants' corridor. I mapped this on the way up because I map things. Go! She burst into the grand hall just as Lucius moved in for the kill. Edmund was limping, front leg dragging, pinned against the pillar. A side door opened. One of Lucius's allies, panicking, shoved kitchen staff into the hall. The boy, the one who'd lied about Bridget, stumbled into the path of the fighting wolves, small and terrified and directly in Lucius's trajectory. The healer in her didn't negotiate with the woman in love. Both agreed. She slid to her knees beside the boy, shielding him with her own body. The floor shook with the impact of wolves fighting 10 feet away. She didn't flinch. "It's okay," she said, her voice calm and steady amidst the chaos. "I'm a medic. Look at me. Right at me. You're all right." The boy, the one who had helped frame her for treason, looked up at the woman he'd condemned, and she was checking his pulse with steady hands. "I'm sorry," he choked out, tears streaming. "He told me to say it. Lord Hale. He said if I didn't." "I know," Bridget said, not unkindly. "Hold still. You're going to be fine." "You are magnificent." The hall went quiet. Both wolves stopped. The entire pack watched as the Blackwood medic, the accused traitor, knelt on their floor with one of their children in her arms, and there was no performance in it. There was no angle. There was just a healer doing what healers do. Lucius hesitated. The hesitation lasted 1 second. Edmund's wolf hit him like a thunderbolt. He slammed Lucius to the ground, and in a single, devastating motion, his jaws closed on Lucius's right shoulder. The crunch was audible across the silent hall. Lucius's wolf screamed, a sound that made the pack flinch. Edmund held, and the joint gave, tendons tearing, bone shifting where bone should not shift. When he released, the shoulder hung wrong. It would heal, wolves heal, but it would never be right again. Lucius would never shift the same way, never run the way he had. The man who had raised him would carry this proof in every step for the rest of his life. Something broke in Lucius then, quietly. Not just the bone, the foundational belief of his life, that he knew what was best, that his judgment was the steady hand the kingdom needed, shattered against the stone floor. He exposed his throat. It was over. Edmund shifted back, panting, bruised, bleeding. He stood tall. He looked at the man on the ground, the man who had taught him to ride, to fight, to rule, who had been his father in every way that mattered. And when he spoke, his voice didn't shake. "Lucius Hale, you are stripped of your title. You are exiled from the Silverwood Pack." He stopped. The hall was so quiet he could hear his own breathing. "You raised me," he said. "You held this kingdom together when I couldn't hold a sword. You were the best thing in my life for a very long time. And you repaid that by framing an innocent woman and using your own son as a pawn in a game he didn't know he was playing." He paused. "I will not erase what you were, but I cannot forgive what you became." Lucius, shifting back, clutching his ruined shoulder, looked at Edmund for a long moment. There was no rage in his face, no defiance, just the terrible clarity of a man who had finally been seen for what he was, and the ghost of something that might have been grief for the boy he'd raised, standing before him now as the king he'd never believed in. He walked out of the hall. He did not look at Marcus. Marcus was standing very still at the edge of the crowd. His face was blank, the complete, catastrophic blankness of a man whose entire understanding of his own life had just been dismantled in public. his father, his king, the two pillars of his world, and one had just been revealed as rotten. Edmund looked for him in the crowd. Found him. Their eyes met across the hall, and neither of them had a single word that was adequate. Edmund turned. Across the hall, past his pack, his eyes found the woman kneeling on the floor with a child in her arms. Bridget looked up. The emptiness was gone. What replaced it was raw and bright and terrifying. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the full, unguarded recognition of a woman who had run through a castle because she loved him and was done pretending otherwise. I told you from the beginning, that is not danger. That is ours. A slow, hesitant applause started at the back of the hall. It spread, filling the room. They weren't just clapping for the victor. They were clapping for their king and for the healer who had knelt on their floor for one of their children. He found her in the courtyard after. She was among her freed people, checking injuries, organizing the journey home. Her element, a whirlwind of quiet competence, her hands moving with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was for. She saw him coming and paused. The air between them was clean and stripped of all pretenses. "Your leg," she said immediately, her healer's eyes going to the bandage on his thigh. "Did Alistair stitch it or just wrap it?" "He wraps when he should stitch. Sit down." Not a request. "She is tending to us. All of my advice led to this moment." "None of your advice led to this moment," Edmund muttered. "What?" "Nothing." She knelt beside the stone bench and unwrapped the bandage with practiced hands. Her fingers were warm and competent and gentle, and every place they touched sent a quiet current through him that had nothing to do with medicine. She examined the wound, made a small disapproving sound, and rewrapped it properly, her fingers precise, her focus absolute. When she finished, her hand stayed on his leg, just above the bandage. She looked at it as if surprised to find it there. "Your hand is on his leg. The medical justification ended 4 seconds ago. Your pulse is doing the warm, slow thing, the good one. Don't run. For once in your life, don't run." "They're all going home," she said softly, watching her people in the courtyard. "Free. Safe." "You actually did it." "I told you I would." "Bridget, I asked you if you did it. I sat in that tower and I asked you." "You did." She looked at him steadily. "And it broke something in me. I won't pretend it didn't. I opened a door I've kept locked for years, and the first thing that came through was doubt." He flinched. "But," she said, and her hand tightened on his leg, "you also believed me when I answered. You took my medical report and bet your crown on it. You stood in front of your kingdom and chose my word over the man who raised you." She paused. "My last alpha traded me away like equipment and called it loyalty. You doubted me and called it doubt. You didn't dress it up. You didn't pretend. And then you made it right." She's forgiving him. Oh. She's doing the brave thing, the real one. "I chose you," he said, his voice raw. "Not the bond. You." Her eyes filled. A tear traced a path down her dusty cheek. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before he gently, carefully wiped it away with his thumb. His palm stayed against her cheek. She leaned into it, a tiny movement, barely there, the smallest surrender she had ever made. She leaned. She leaned. Do you understand what that costs her? She hasn't leaned toward anyone in years. Her body just chose you before her brain gave permission, and that is the most beautiful thing I have ever... Oh, she's crying. That hasn't happened since... Okay, I'll be quiet now. "I stayed," she whispered, her hand coming up to cover his where it rested on her cheek. "Not because the bond told me to. I'm staying because when you asked that terrible question, you also listened to the answer." He leaned in. She leaned in. Their foreheads met. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, his hand on her cheek and hers over his. The courtyard sounds faded. The world got very small and very warm. Kiss her, I am begging you. The proximity is optimal. If he doesn't kiss us in 3 seconds, I am going to make her grab his shirt. Don't test me. He kissed her, soft, slow. The kind of kiss that didn't demand anything. It just arrived, like rain after a long drought, and it said, I see you, all of you. The sarcasm and the stolen paper and the healer's hands and the wound underneath, and I am here, and I am not going anywhere. See? Proximity. I said proximity. Nobody listens to me and then they act surprised. My courtship methodology is flawless. Don't you dare ruin this moment. When they pulled apart, she was smiling, full, beautiful, devastating. For the record, she said, I felt it, in the dungeon, the first time. My wolf tried to tell me. I called it a threat response. For 2 weeks, my wolf has been filing complaints. Finally, she admits it. 2 weeks of terrible advice from my end, Edmund said, grinning. My wolf wanted me to bring you a dead rabbit. A dead rabbit. He also thought I should growl at you, low and soft. She paused, went slightly pink. I am choosing not to comment on that. She would have responded to it. Don't tell him. The growl would have worked. My methodology is flawless. He took her hand, their fingers interlaced. After everything, the dungeon and the steam and the tower and the question that broke her and the answer that saved him, it was just this. 2 hands, holding on. The days that followed were quiet and full. Bridget's pack, on receiving their people back, all of them, healthy and cared for, sent an envoy. Not for war, but for talks. The peace Edmund had started unilaterally began to take root, fragile and real. Marcus stayed. He didn't speak to Edmund for 3 days. He performed his duties with mechanical precision. Ledgers filed, guards rotated, supplies inventoried. And behind the efficiency was a man moving through the ruins of everything he'd believed about his father. When he finally spoke, it was to hand over a supply report with hands that were perfectly steady and eyes that were not. Edmund took the report and said, I'm sorry about your father. Marcus said, he's not dead. He's just not who I thought he was. And then they stood in silence for a while, because some things can only be carried, not discussed. But Marcus didn't leave, and Edmund didn't ask him to. That was enough, for now. Bridget established a teaching infirmary. She argued with Edmund about sanitation protocols. She made him laugh. The infirmary bed faces the wrong way. Alistair's technique is adequate, but his bedside manner is a war crime. Also, the king's scent is all over this room now. I'm not saying I arranged that. The chair he sits in is positioned where his scent carries optimally. This is a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. A beautiful, strategic coincidence. One afternoon he found her in the infirmary, finishing a suture on a young wolf who had fallen out of a tree and was trying very hard not to cry. Bridget's hands moved with practiced grace, her voice low and soothing, her attention total. Good as new, she said, tying off the last stitch. Try to avoid that particular tree for a week. It clearly has a grudge. The young wolf grinned through his tears and scampered off. Bridget straightened, pushing a strand of hair out of her face, and saw Edmund leaning in the doorway, watching her with an expression that made her wolf start narrating. He's doing the look. The soft one where his whole face changes, and his scent goes to warm cedar, and his heart rate drops because he's happy. He's happy watching you work. You make him happy. And your heart is doing the corresponding thing, the matched thing. And I know because I count every beat. Enjoying the show? Bridget asked, drying her hands. Immensely, Edmund said. Alistair retired this morning. He wants you to run the infirmary. Budget, staff, full authority to implement, his words, the sanitation protocols this castle has criminally neglected for the past century. Say yes. We will have our own territory. We can arrange the beds properly. We can fix the ventilation. I'll need to overhaul the entire training program. And the herb stores are a disgrace. And the quarantine protocols are non-existent. And if I find one more healer using dirty instruments, is that a yes? She looked at him, the king who had emptied his dungeons, who had asked her the worst question and then believed her answer, who was looking at her now with the expression that made her wolf narrate every physiological response in real time and made her not even mind. It's a yes, she said, on one condition. Name it. You personally apologize to Elsbeth about the wind chimes. He winced. That's a steep price. The steepest, she agreed, her eyes sparkling. I'll come for moral support. You'll come to watch me suffer. Obviously. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly. No flinch, no armor, no war face. Just the warm, solid reality of him, his chin resting on top of her head, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. His heart rate, 62 beats per minute. Calm, steady, happy. That is the sound of a man who is exactly where he wants to be. And your heart, 64, almost matched. You're almost matched, Bridget. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know what that means? It means we're home, Bridget whispered against his chest. What? Edmund asked. Nothing, she said. Wolf stuff. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. She closed her eyes and let herself be held, and her wolf was quiet. Not the terrible silence of the tower, the good quiet. The quiet of a wolf who has finally gotten her human to stop running. And in the warmth of that infirmary, surrounded by the smell of clean herbs and healing, with the king's heartbeat steady under her ear and her own matching it beat for beat, Bridget Fenn, field medic, prisoner of war, feral life coach survivor, finally understood something she had been too afraid to know. She was not in danger. She was home. Told you, her wolf said. Told you, his wolf agreed.